Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Tacoma Cyclist. I am the Tacoma Cyclist, and with me as always is my sidekick, the Boogeyman. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're actually going to introduce you to juniors gearing for USAC sanctioned races in the United States. In different countries this rule may not apply, but in the United States there's some very specific rules about juniors gearing restrictions and juniors rollout. So we're going to talk a little bit about those restrictions, those rollouts, and we're going to show you on, well, if I can get it down here, the Boogeyman's bike itself. So we're going to be looking at his bike and his gearing today. So thanks for joining us here, and we're going to walk you through a couple important steps for rolling out. Okay, so step one is to place a mark on the ground. Use your trusty measuring tape and come on out 26 feet and place another mark on the ground. Be pretty close to accurate if you can. Okay, first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to need to get your bike into the biggest ring in the front and the smallest ring in the back. So the Boogeyman's going to go ahead and do that with a little bit of assistance here. I'm going to lift up the back of his bike while he goes and shifts, if he remembers how to do it. Gets that into the big ring. Okay. And then he's going to continue shifting to get it into the little ring in the back, the little cog in the back. Great. Go ahead and apply the brakes. Now, different judges will do this different ways, but the most common way is to place your crank arm in such a way that it is straight up and down, and that your rear axle is dead center over the back line. Now, some cases they'll also do it so that the bottom bracket is over the back line, which is fine too. And that's which way we're going to do it here. So we can move the tape measure aside. We're not going to need that. Now, what the Boogeyman is going to do is he's going to wheel the bike backwards, starting at the beginning, and we're watching that crank arm. That crank arm has to be able to make one full revolution by the time it hits that mark. Oh, and look at that. The Boogeyman failed his rollout. And why is that the Boogeyman failed his rollout?
I don't have the right gears.
That's right. He doesn't have the right gears on this bike right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap out his rear wheel very quickly and show you what it would look like with the correct gears. Okay, now we're going to try this again. Let's go ahead and roll out. Now notice that pedal. It's the exact same setup here, just with different gearing, and stop. Notice the Boogeyman cleared his pedal revolution and has probably about a good foot left there. And what that means is that ultimately the gearing that Boogeyman is using is actually big enough that if he wanted to, he could upsize a little bit. Now in this case, this is a 14-tooth cog going up to a 28, and this is a compact crank with a 50 and a 34. So in this case, we could probably go to a 13 or a 12 here in the rear cassette, or all the way up to a 52 by 36 in the front. Now there's actually a couple reasons we don't do that, but we'll get into that in a moment. Okay, the Boogeyman's going to point us through some of the important aspects of juniors rollout and how you can do a juniors rollout on your own. So the first step to juniors rollout is to make sure you have the right gears, both in the front and in the back. So in this case, you'll notice that the Boogeyman has a SRAM Force 5034 compact chain set. For most things, that will work just fine, but the key to this is getting your ratios correct. In the United States, or in the USAC cycling rule book, juniors must have a gear set that will roll them out in under 26 feet, or 26 feet and under. Most bikes, of course, nowadays are coming with a 5034, so this is how to get started on a 5034. Now, importantly, for a 5034, you're going to need a special cassette. You can't just use a 5034 with an 11 to 28. But in this particular case, we've got a 5034 with a 14 to 28 cassette. Okay, so Boogeyman, how often do you have to roll out at juniors races?
Every single time.
Every single time. What happens if you fail to roll out?
They disqualify me.
Absolutely. They can disqualify you, or sometimes they'll just give you a time penalty, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen some pretty nasty time penalties, haven't we?
Yeah.
What happens if you roll out and then you walk away and then come back?
They're gonna make you do a lot again.
Or
they're gonna disqualify you.
That's right. So when the judge rolls you out, you better stay in place, especially if you're starting a time trial and you do a rollout. Because if you do that and then you walk away, they don't know that your gears are the same. So they assume that you've gone and changed your gears out, in which case you're going to get a time penalty or you're going to get disqualified. And we've seen that happen, haven't we, bud?
Yes.
Okay. So we don't want that to happen. When do rollouts typically occur?
Before the race or after the race?
Right before the race or immediately following the race. Always ask your officiator who's going to be doing the rollout, where the rollout's going to be, and if they have any special requirements for rollout, like making sure you stay with your bike while you do it. Typically, do the judges like it when the parents help out the rollout, or do the judges prefer it just when the kids do their own thing with rollout?
They like it when the kids do it.
Right. You want to be able to take responsibility. So what that means is that the kid needs to know how to do a rollout, what it means to have the bike in the right gear to do the rollout, and then how to actually perform the rollout. Okay, so we've seen what happens when you have the wrong wheels or the wrong gearing on your bike for a rollout. It just doesn't work. Now, the reason that the Boogeyman actually failed his first rollout in our demonstration here was because the cassette that he's got on there is an 11 to 28. And a 50-34 with an 11 to 28 in the rear, it's not going to pass, is it, Boogeyman?
No.
No. But we're in winter season right now, and we're going on some longer rides. We're doing some long, fun rides, and sometimes the Boogeyman likes to get some speed up. So that 50-34 with an 11 to 28 allows him to really put out some additional power. But that's the very heart of the reason why the USAC and UCI have restrictions on your juniors gearing. They don't want kids to push it too hard. Particularly, they don't want to try to spin a high gear at a low cadence. So the idea with a 50-34 and a 14 to 28 in the back is that they're never going to be putting out the kind of power that's going to damage their knees, and their knees are really fragile at this age. So that's the entire purpose of that gearing restriction. So the real question is how do you get juniors gearing? So again, if you've got a bike that's got a 50-34 chain set on it, you're most of the way there anyway. The next step is getting the right cassette, and that's a 14 to 28 cassette or a 14 to 25 cassette. If you live in an area that doesn't have very many hills, a 14 to 25 is going to do just fine. If you live in an area that's got a lot of hills, a 14 to 28 is going to be really beneficial. It definitely helps, especially on some of those long mountain climbs, doesn't it, Boogeyman?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and the other nice thing about that, by the way, is with a 14 to 28, a 10 or 11 speed bike, you've got a lot of close gears next to each other. You don't have to worry about clicking through a gear and finding out that you're going 96 cadence in one gear and then 82 cadence in the next gear. You've usually got like a one-step or a two-step increment there. Nothing too big. So that's always beneficial as well. Finding the gears, though, can be kind of hard. In his case, he's riding a SRAM group set. And I can tell you that a SRAM group set and a Shimano group set, probably without a doubt, for an 11-speed cassette, the best way to go is to get a 105 14 to 28 speed cassette. It's going to be hard to find anything else. I don't know that SRAM even makes a 14 to 28 in any of their gear sets. Shimano does, but they make a Dura Ace, and then they make the 105. I haven't seen an Ultegra. There's nothing wrong with going with the 105. It's a perfectly good cassette. It's going to set you back about $70 no matter where you go. So just be prepared to do that. And if you're using multiple wheels, get 2 of them. Okay, you don't want to have your spare wheel in the car have an 11 to 28, and then when you go to actually use it, fail rollout at the end because you had the wrong wheel in the follow car. So get a couple of those 14 to 28s. They're not that bad. They'll last you for a year or 2 or even longer, so it's not a major expense. Now, another option is blocking gears, and we have done some gear blocking before. When the Boogeyman rode a crit this year that he wasn't really expecting to, and he rode it on these wheels, we had no choice but to block out some gears. And the idea was, first of all, you have to let the judges know that you've blocked out the gears. If they see that you're not in the hardest gear, they might disqualify you there unless they start messing with it and say, oh, you've got some gears blocked out. And what that means is you're basically going to adjust your limit screws to make it so that you can't even shift into that 11 and 12 and 13 cog. You're going to be only down to the 14. There's a couple reasons you wouldn't want to do this. Number one, you lose a lot of gears. You know, you've got an 11-speed cassette. Why would you block out 3 or even 4 of your gears? That's just doesn't make any sense. You've now got a 7-speed cassette. The other reason is that some of the races, they actually won't let you use gear blocking as a method. You have to use juniors cassette. So if it's a national event, you've got to use a juniors cassette. No questions asked. Another reason you wouldn't necessarily want to block out those gears, if you're racing in a situation where you have a follow car that's providing neutral wheels, or you have a neutral wheel pit and a crit, and the kids are racing, then what happens is if the kid has a flat in the crit or in the race, and they get a neutral wheel, and that neutral wheel is probably set up for juniors gearing, 14 to 28. and you've got the bottom 3 gears blocked out, then you're now getting rid of their 14, their 15, their 16, potentially starting at a 17, which that's not going to be fun. They're going to be spinning like crazy for the entire race, and that's just not. Now another option is blocking gears, and we have done some gear blocking before. When the Boogeyman rode a crit this year that he wasn't really expecting to, and he rode it on these wheels, we had no choice but to block out some gears. And the idea was, first of all, you have to let the judges know that you've blocked out the gears. If they see that you're not in the hardest gear, they might disqualify you there unless they start messing with it and say, oh, you've got some gears blocked out. And what that means is you're basically going to adjust your limit screws to make it so that you can't even shift into that 11 and 12 and 13 cog. You're going to be only down to the 14. There's a couple reasons you wouldn't want to do this. Number one, you lose a lot of gears. If you've got an 11-speed cassette, why would you block out 3 or even 4 of your gears? That's just doesn't make any sense. You've now got a 7-speed cassette. The other reason is that some of the races, they actually won't let you use gear blocking as a method. You have to use juniors cassette. So if it's a national event, you've got to use a juniors cassette. No questions asked. Another reason you wouldn't necessarily want to block out those gears, if you're racing in a situation where you have a follow car that's providing neutral wheels, or you have a neutral wheel pit and a crit, and the kids are racing, then what happens is if the kid has a flat in the crit or in the race, and they get a neutral wheel, and that neutral wheel is probably set up for juniors gearing, 14 to 28, and you've got the bottom 3 gears blocked out, and you're now getting rid of their 14, their 15, their 16, potentially starting at a 17, which that's not going to be fun. They're going to be spinning like crazy for the entire race, and that's just not going to work. So go get that juniors gearing. If in doubt, just go to your local bicycle shop and just say, hey, I need a 14 to 28 11-speed cassette. And if you know it's a Shimano 105, because it's really one of the only ones out there, get it. If you feel like dropping $250 for a cassette, get the Dura Ace. But otherwise, spend the $70, get the Shimano. And just FYI, it's $70 whether you go to your local bicycle shop, whether you go to Amazon, whether you go to online shops. So just take your money to your local bicycle shop. Don't go to the big name box stores. It's just, keep your money local. They'll be able to get it for you in a couple days. They'll put it on for you at no charge, so you don't even have to worry about it. They'll index your gears for you. Just go to your local bicycle shop, and it's going to be the same. So at the end of the day, putting on that mid-compact cassette and a 14 to 28, you're going to be all set up. Has there ever been a situation where you haven't felt like you've had enough gears on your bike?
No.
Have you gone above 40 miles an hour on some races with us?
Almost.
Almost. Well, yeah, on the Pacific Raceways event, you on the downhill section in 14 to 28, you hit 39.8. So there's really, blocking out those lowest few gears, it's not going to kill anything. He holds with us in the sprints when he's spinning out his biggest possible gear. He holds with us in the downhills. The only thing you're doing is keeping it so that the kid's not cranking away, 400, 500, 600 watts on a 60 cadence on too big of a gear, and that just shreds their knees. So juniors gearing is actually pretty simple. You can test for it yourself at home. It's really, really easy, really, really cheap, and you just can't go wrong. All right, thanks again for watching, and go ahead and subscribe and share. We're also going to provide some more information about junior cycling through time, because really we feel that junior cycling is something that a lot of kids should get involved in. It's really easy to get involved. It's obviously really fun. We have a blast cycling together, and there's no reason why kids can't do this. They play soccer, they play football. Why not get into cycling too? And it's something that all kids can get into. So stay tuned, because we're going to provide a lot more ways and a lot more information on how you can get your kid, or if you're a kid, how you can get involved in junior cycling as well. Thanks again. Be sure to subscribe, be sure to share. Thanks.